Hey Geography kiddos. It is Thursday. I just finished with the 9A group a little while ago, so I'm trying to get some ducks in a row here and get your lesson uploaded. I figured out how to maybe get the video loaded a little quicker, so I'm hoping that today's will not take me 3 hours, but I'm gonna make this quick as I possibly can. We started China Part 2, and so we're going to do a little bit of review from the last lesson, China Part 1, which is really kind of the physical geography, and then of course also a discussion about the larger area of East Asia, which includes China, Mongolia, North and South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. So today's fact of the day, if you'll notice in your PowerPoint that I sent you, is over this lovely gentleman. I don't know if you can see in the picture, but he has this very large mole on his chin, and I don't know why. Some of the pictures of him has it kind of airbrushed off, but it's a big old mole. So I have a mole right here, but you can't see it. I think if my mole had gotten this big, I would have had it removed. But anyway, he is affectionately known as Chairman Mao. You will see his picture in the PowerPoint for the fact of the day. He is the father of the Communist Party in China. He is a very revered figure, sort of like Vladimir Lenin in Russia in the old Soviet era, was the father of the Communist Party there, sort of. And so the Russian people continued to appreciate him beyond his death, whereas with Joseph Stalin, he was perceived to be horrible after he died. Chairman Mao continues to be revered in China. In fact, everywhere you go, you will see Chairman Mao's picture. And then I look to see if I have a lot of Chinese money somewhere. And there are lots of pictures of Chairman Mao. I can't find it right now, but I'll show it to you guys when you get back after Thanksgiving. But their money has his image. Buildings have his image. Tiananmen Square in China has a mausoleum where his body is on display. In the Forbidden City, his picture is over the Forbidden City when you go in. So he's all over China, and he's still considered a beloved figure of the Communist Party. So, of course, in the Soviet Union, communism collapsed. The Soviet Union collapsed. Russia today is a little bit, they pretend to be a democracy, but they're really controlled by centralized authority. So they have some communist bends, but effectively communism didn't work there. In China, they are still communist. The government is communist. The political system is communist. Centralized authority controls every aspect of life, but the Chinese people don't necessarily know that. They think that what they're experiencing is normal and free, with the exception of religious institutions tend to be cracked down on in China. We'll talk about religion in China later, but there's still China is still a communist country. It is one of the few places where communism still exists. However, they have employed or introduced free market capitalism into their economy, so their economic system is not necessarily communist anymore. So anyway, Mr. Mao Zedong is how you pronounce his name. Most people call him Chairman Mao. You'll notice in the picture right below the fact of the day slide is a picture of Beijing, and the center area is called Tiananmen Square, and the building in the center of the Tiananmen Square is a mausoleum where Chairman Mao's body is buried. The red buildings in the block behind Tiananmen Square is the Forbidden City. If you flip to the next slide, you'll see a picture of entrance into the Forbidden City, and you'll see Chairman Mao's picture above the entrance into the Forbidden City. Now remember, the Forbidden City is where the emperors lived, so having Chairman Mao's picture over the entrance to the area where the emperors lived for thousands of years is very symbolic. So I'm going to read through some of my facts of the day on Chairman Mao. And if you would, in your Google Doc, just come up, you can write any 6 facts that you want to. And I'm just going to read through this. So Chairman Mao, it was I'm sorry, let me start over again. Can you name the greatest mass murderer of the 20th century? No, it was not Hitler and it was not Stalin. It was actually Mao Zedong. It is estimated that over 65 million Chinese people died during his long and difficult rule. Chairman Mao, or Mao Zedong, was born in 1893. He was born on a farm to a family of farmers. Let me read here. He was born in 1893. Let's see here. He left the family farm as a child, seeking a higher calling, something more noble than farming, according to him. And he calls this his wandering time. He began by attending university studies where he decided he might want to be a teacher. He became politically involved when China's last emperor was deposed in 1911. So China had emperors from 1500 BC all the way till the 1900s. And in 1911, the final emperor finally was basically had to step down, step aside. And then China was trying to come up with a new government. And if you remember, so 1911 is on the cusp of World War I. The Japanese were very imperialistic, so China was always fighting their natural enemy, the Japanese. The Bolshevik Revolution took place in 1917, so communism was very active in that part of the world, right at the time that Japan was trying to find its footing and try to figure out how to govern their people beyond the era of the emperors, which had been in place for 3,500 years. And so the communists took advantage of this vacuum, just like they did in Russia when Tsar Nicholas stepped aside. And I'm sure there was also a lot of trickle-down effect because Russia is a very close neighbor to China. And so in 1920, the Communist Party was formally formed or came into being in China, and Chairman Mao, or Mao Zedong, was one of the founding members of the Chinese Communist Party. And so that started in 1920, again about the same time that the Bolshevik Revolution and the Communist Revolution was taking place in Russia. And so the more traditional or stable government of China that was trying to make its way in the era after the emperors soon found itself engaged in a battle with the Communist Party, who was also trying to control the government. And so Mao Zedong actually became the leader of what's known as the People's Liberation Army, sometimes just referred to as the PLA. And so he was a colonel or a military leader in this People's Liberation Army, and they fought against the government of China, which was under the control of a guy by the name of Chiang Kai-shek. That's kind of irrelevant, but Chiang Kai-shek was the leader of the Chinese government. And so for decades, they fought back and forth. And actually, when World War II happened in the 1940s and the Japanese started to attack China, Chiang Kai-shek's traditional government joined forces with the People's Liberation Army under Mao Zedong, and they fought together against the Japanese. But once the war was over, Mao Zedong and the Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army essentially defeated Chiang Kai-shek's traditional Chinese government. The traditional government fled the country and went to Taiwan, which was called Formosa at the time, but today we call it Taiwan. And even to this day, China is very nervous and uncomfortable about Taiwan because the Taiwanese claim to be the legitimate government of China, even though they aren't anymore. And so the communists ran the government off, and then Mao Zedong in 1949 became the chairman of the new People's Republic of China. And so effectively he served as a dictator or a leader from 1949 until 1976. So he's a pretty old guy when he died. He was in his 80s, I guess. So let me read on a little bit here. When Chairman Mao became dictator or leader of the new country, the communist era of China formally began. And so historians will say that communist China, or the People's Republic of China, started in 1949. According to a book called The Black Book of Communism, an estimated 65 million Chinese people died as a result of Mao's repeated merciless attempts to create this new socialist China. Anybody who got in his way were done away with. They were executed, imprisoned, or sent to forced labor camps. China had their own version of gulags. As Mao Zedong tried to create this new society, he did something similar to what Stalin did. He collectivized the farms, but he had no idea what he was doing. And as a result, millions of people starved to death. Let me read this part. The most inhumane example of Mao Zedong's contempt for human life came when he ordered the collectivization of Chinese farms under the ironic slogan, "It's the Great Leap Forward." It was a deadly combination of lies about grain production, disastrous farming methods, and the misdistribution of food produced the worst famine in human history. Deaths from hunger reached more than 50% during these years of 1959 to 1961, where nearly 30 to 40 million people in China died of starvation. So this communist plan to put all of the farms under communist control, to redistribute food from food production to the people, cost 30 to 40 million people their lives. 5 years later, so in 1965-ish, when Mao detected that people were losing their interest in communism, he organized what was known as the Cultural Revolution. And effectively, he armed the young people of China to go around to all of the various institutions in China and make sure that people were living the communist life. And so they were called the Red Guard, and they were made up of people between the ages of 14 and 21, so they were young people, and they literally went to universities and cities and villages to make sure that people were following Chairman Mao's ways and ideology, that they had gotten rid of religion. Communism expels religion, that everybody was carrying Chairman Mao's little red book that had all of his poetry and famous sayings in them. Teachers in particular were very much attacked during university professors because they were perceived to be anti-cultural revolution. And so a lot of them were killed. The information that I have says that the Red Guards or the Red Army actually they would round teachers up or professors up, and they would humiliate them, and then they would kill them, and sometimes they would eat them as a form of intimidation to the academic world in general, to keep in step with the communist way. While this was happening, Chairman Mao also expanded the Lagoya, which is a system of 1,000 forced labor camps throughout China. It says through the 1950s up until the 1980s, 50 million Chinese people passed through the Chinese version of Soviet gulags, and 20 million of them died as a result of the primitive living conditions and the intense work they were required to do. And even though all of this, Mao Zedong still remains the most honored figure in Chinese Communist Party. At one end of the historic Tiananmen Square is his mausoleum, where people are allowed to come and visit his body. If you flip back over to the slides, there's a picture of the money with Chairman Mao's picture on it. The picture of the mausoleum, the square building with kind of I guess it sort of looks like a pagoda. You see all the people lined up to go in. I suspect that a lot of those are, it looks like maybe school field trips or something, because a lot of them are wearing the same thing. Looks like uniforms. But then there's a picture of Chairman Mao's body. He is in a clear glass casket being guarded by some of the army, and he is draped in a flag, the Communist Chinese flag. Woohoo! So if you have a chance to go to Beijing, which a lot of your family members, parents and stuff, maybe even grandparents travel for Walmart over to China. And so, and I know a lot of people in this class did, so perhaps they'll have a chance to go see Chairman Mao. Okay, so if you didn't get 6 things, I'm going to upload the my little sheet that has all of the information, so you can snag some of your information off of there. So we'll come back to Chairman Mao over the course of time. He's a very important figure. I actually have him, if you can see, let me lift this up. I have him on the whiteboard over there now next to a picture of Vladimir Putin. I don't think Vladimir Putin is a dictator like Chairman Mao. Perhaps he would be, though, if he lived during communist Russia. I don't know. Okay, so a little bit of review. One of the things I told the kids today, I passed back the test. I still need to grade your tests. I need to print them off of Google Classroom. Just a little bit more challenging to get to, but I will try to do that today and have them finished by tomorrow, hopefully. I had some kids that did really good on the test, and I had some kids that did really, really poorly on the test. And so at this point in the semester, if you're still really, really struggling on the test, then you need to do something differently. One of the things that I told the kids in class today is that on the first page, the matching page, kids are still just missing a whole tremendous amount of ones on that front page. For instance, about 50% of the class did not select the right answer for Vladimir Lenin, that he is Russian. He's part of the Russian, rather than Ukraine or Estonia or whatever. I was like, that's kind of fundamental. That's like not being able to identify Chairman Mao as Chinese. And so I'm not sure if people aren't listening, if they're daydreaming, if they're not adequately preparing for the test. But one of the things that I always try to do in class is to spend a little bit of time reviewing the information previously from the previous class. And so while block schedule is pretty challenging because you have a whole disc, you skip a whole day between classes, and sometimes it's hard to retain information, definitely take advantage of the reviews that I do with you all. It will be very beneficial to you. So I always try to do that if I have time. So I did some review with them today. So one of the questions I asked them what are the countries of East Asia that we are about to discuss? It was one of your definitions from yesterday's lesson. And so it's Mongolia, China, Taiwan, North and South Korea, and Japan. Next question that I asked them, and I'll ask it to you and then see if you could, actually you've got the PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see it. But the question I asked was approximately how many miles across is China? Remember, it's about the same size as the United States. If you were to fly from from New York to LA, it would be about 3,000 miles across. China's the same way. It's about 3,000 miles across. What is the name of the tallest or highest plateau in the world? The answer is Tibet, or the Tibetan Plateau. And then there is a definition here, and again, I'm going to be making copies of all these for you. So the definition, which is taken from the chapter 26, section 1, the physical geography of East Asia, is plateau. A plateau is a large, flat, elevated area of land, and so it almost feels mountainous, except it's not rugged and jaggedy like mountains would be. It's a raised area that is level on the top. The picture in this particular slide is taken from the movie Up. In the movie Up, Carl goes to a faraway place. Actually, the location that it's patterned off of is Angel Falls in Venezuela. And so anyway, this is not a real picture, but it's what a plateau would look like. And then I have several other pictures there. One of them shows the Tibetan Plateau, and then it has a picture of the mountains. Some of them are snow-capped, but you can see from looking across at a great distance that there's mountains, but they are all kind of at the same height. They're flat across the top. Another one was taken from an airplane, and you can see it's kind of mountainous, but it's generally flat across the top of those mountains. We also talked about the Gobi Desert in the previous section. The Gobi Desert is the coldest desert in the world. The question was, what 2 countries can you find the Gobi Desert in? It's predominantly in Mongolia, but it does bleed down into China as well. At one time, Mongolia was part of China. It is no longer. And the Gobi Desert, it's the coldest desert in the world, but it's not a sand dune desert, or a rock desert. It's called a gravel desert. So lots and lots of little rocks. There is a picture of the Himalaya Mountains, the range. It goes all the way up into northwest India, down across over to Bhutan and Burma. I'm sorry, that's still India there. 9, I think I said 8 yesterday, but 9 of the top 10 tallest mountains in the world are in the Himalaya Mountains, and Mount Everest, of course, is the tallest. The Himalaya Mountains are probably the outside edge of a tectonic plate, and so it's pushed up, it's raised up. So if you go from the Himalaya Mountains northward, you enter the Tibetan Plateau. And so this is the outside edge of that tectonic plate. There's a picture of the base camp to climb Mount Everest on the China side. If you were go to the Nepal side, on the south side of the mountain, it's much more commercialized. There's a lot more companies operating out of there. One of the things I told the kids is that the climbing season for Mount Everest is 3 months if you're lucky. It takes about 2 months to actually climb Mount Everest because you have to stay at different stations to acclimate your body to the climate. You can't just be like, or to the altitude. You can't just be like, here I am, I'm gonna climb the mountain, or your brain will bleed, your lungs will explode, or something like that. So your body has to acclimate itself to the altitude. So there's a few people in this picture that are climbing Everest. It looks like the mountain is like right there, but it's actually quite a good distance away. The top of it anyway, the summit. As I said yesterday, I believe, Mount Everest is not technically the tallest mountain in the world. It is the tallest mountain above sea level, but Mount Mauna Kea in Hawaii is actually the tallest mountain in the world. It starts at the base of the ocean, and it's a volcano, and so it rose up above the water level, and I think it's about 14,000 feet above sea level even. So there's 20,000 below. Let me see if I've got that right. Yeah, approximately 14,000 above sea level, 20,000 feet below sea level. But when people say, well, what's the tallest mountain in the world? They usually are talking about Mount Everest because they're usually talking about above sea level. Like, I don't say, what's the tallest mountain in the world above sea level? I would just say, what's the tallest mountain in the world? So Mauna Kea is the technical answer, but most people are talking about Everest. Then there is a map with Po from Kung Fu Panda that shows you the 9 mountains that are the tallest mountains in the world. Most people will climb some of these other mountains before they climb Everest, and I think this map has, yeah, it has the feet. So Everest is 29,000. This says 29 feet. I usually go with the 29,035 feet. There's some, depends on what book or what you look at. It shows you how many people have died trying. When this picture was done, 121 people had died trying to climb Mount Everest. K2, which is on the northern part of India and Pakistan, is 28,251 feet. That is traditionally climbed prior. That is one of the mountains that people will try to climb. I think it's the second tallest mountain in the world. Yeah, it looks like it is. 44 people have died climbing it. I don't think it's quite as steep or at the top. A whole bunch of them have lost a lot of people, but Everest remains the most dangerous. You can look at the numbers on there. Then there's a chart that shows you, it says, who's the daddy? It shows you the tallest mountains in each of the continents, Mount Fuji or in various places, Mount Fuji in Japan, Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, Mount McKinley in North America, which is actually in Alaska. Mount McKinley is named after President McKinley, who was the first president to visit Alaska. You may not even know his name, but President McKinley was president at the turn of the century. I think he was elected in 1896, something like that. He was actually one of the 4 presidents assassinated, and Teddy Roosevelt was his vice president. So that is how Teddy Roosevelt ended up becoming president, because President McKinley was assassinated. But anyway, he was the first U.S. president to visit Alaska, and so it was named Mount McKinley. President Obama renamed the mountain when he was president during his second term, and renamed it a name of one of the Native American tribes in Alaska. I don't remember exactly what it is, but the next slide shows you a picture of the vast expanse of the Great Wall of China. Now, there are a lot more different variations of the Great Wall, little different sections here and there that are not shown on this map. But I would like for you to watch a video associated with this. So when you get to that map and you see the Great Wall of China, you'll notice Beijing, the star there. The Great Wall was intended to protect primarily the population centers and the capital city of Beijing from invaders from the north, but other parts of the wall were built over the centuries to protect various parts of China. So if you would watch the short 5-minute video on the Great Wall of China. And then there is, the next map shows you the Yangtze River, and it shows you where the Three Gorge Dam is. You'll see the city of Wuhan on the Yangtze River. Over to the right, Wuhan is where the coronavirus originated from. It's a city of about 11 million people. And then there's like a little triangle shaped thing on the river that I put on there. That's where the Three Gorge Dam is. And so China prides itself on the Three Gorge Dam because it helps produce hydroelectric power. As the water passes through the dam, they have these engines that absorb that energy, and then they transfer that energy, and it's clean energy. It doesn't produce pollutants and that sort of thing. And China is notorious for being a heavy polluter. Most of their large cities have terrible problem with smog and pollution, and they really haven't cared about it very much, other than it's just a nuisance. And so they've had a lot of pressure from the world community because of global warming stuff and all that. And so they created this hydroelectric thing, and they got a lot of criticism from scientists over this because supposedly it redirects enough of water that it affects the tilt of the earth. I have a hard time believing that, but I've heard that multiple times, so I suppose it could be true. There's some pictures of the Three Gorge Dam area. Remember, this is a dam that dams up water. There are locks that lift boats from the lower level of the river to the higher level where the water has been pooled. I have couple of videos that I want to show you related to the Three Gorge Dam. One of them is a time lapse that shows you what the river system from a satellite, from the sky, looks like prior to the dam being built, and then what it looks like in 2018 once it is finished. And then there's also another video that shows you how the locks work that lift the boats up. I mean, it's amazing the weight and the size of ships that pass through this, that pass through the Three Gorge Dam lock system and move on down the river. So, all right, okay, and then we read page 264, which is chapter 26, section 2. We read the first 2 pages. We read page 644 and part of 645. And so I would like for you to just read the first 2 pages. Yeah, if you just read those first 2 pages, 644 and 645, it talks a little bit about the history of China, the dynasty system. Pay attention to the pictures on the bottom of the page. I'll take pictures like I did last time, but I think Maddie's the only one that doesn't, or Addie, I don't think Addie has her book at home. So pay attention to these pictures on the bottom. I am not an expert on China, especially not an expert on Chinese dynasties. And so there will be 3 dynasties that I will require you to have some knowledge of. The very first one, the first dynasty that unified the various Chinese provinces under one. And then I think I also, actually that may be the only 2. So anyway, read those 2 pages and I'll have that on your daily assignment log. And then real quickly, I'll just kind of zip through the notes. The notes cover off on what you're going to be reading. But the Chinese civilization is about 4,000 years old. It's one of the most ancient civilizations. The West was cut off from Chinese civilization for most of history. They developed in 2 different spheres. The Chinese civilization was very advanced, but they were perceived to be backwards and strange and weird because of their religion and their cultures. A lot of things that Europeans brag about, the Chinese had already developed. You know, the Chinese developed gunpowder, they developed paper. A lot of the things that tied us to China were things that that Europeans wanted to trade with. I was telling the kids a story about Marco Polo. He and his uncle traveled to China and became intimately involved with the Chinese court, the emperor, and trying to develop relationships for trade and stuff. And the emperor at the time was very interested in the religion that these Europeans practiced. And so when Marco Polo left China to bring word back to the Pope at the time, I think it was during the era of the Holy Roman Empire, the emperor requested that the Pope send religious teachers back to China to instruct them on the things of Christianity. I don't know if he was just curious, I'm not sure, but so Marco Polo asked the Pope on behalf of the Chinese emperor to send teachers to China to instruct them on Christianity, and the Pope didn't think that it was worth his time because I don't know why. They were uncivilized, or I don't know what his perception was, and so he just sent, I think, a couple of low-level monks or something. He just kind of disregarded it, and what a tragedy that there was an opening to bring the gospel and Christianity to China, and the Pope just dismissed it like it was unimportant. That's really, really sad. But anyway, some of the achievements of the Chinese include the magnetic compass, which was huge. The Chinese had a pretty significant navy, but they were content in their own area of the world, and so they didn't colonize like the Europeans did Africa. They believed it was more important to maintain security of their own land rather than colonize parts of the Western world. And so, but the magnetic compass helped Europeans to travel all around the world and colonize the whole world. It changed shipping completely. Gunpowder, as I mentioned, paper. The kids, I didn't know this, but Jason, a couple of the other kids were telling me, maybe this is something Mrs. Lefevre taught you, that the Chinese invented gunpowder as a medicine to drink in order to attain longer living or eternal life or something, living life forever, and of course it killed them. And in the process, some of it there was a spark or something, and they realized it was explosive. And so, but the Chinese also invented paper. They had a printing system, I think before the Europeans did. Silk was an integral part of our trade with China when we were able to trade with China. So, and then I spent some time talking a little bit about the traditional religions of China, which are Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. They have a lot in common with one another. They're sort of atheistic religions, which sounds kind of like an oxymoron, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Buddha was born in the area of Nepal or China. Confucius was a political / teacher of China, and then Tao or Tao was also a teacher in China. And there's a lot of similarities: respect for elders, respect for living things, living life well, doing what is right, earning or achieving a place in a higher level of consciousness, overcoming temptations. But the respect for elders and just respect in general is a super important part of all of those religions. And then we talked about a couple of the dynasties. So we talked about the Shang dynasty, which is the first recorded dynasty, dates all the way back to 1500 years before Jesus. And then we landed on the Qin dynasty, which looks like Qin, which started about 200 years before the time of Christ. And this is a really, really important dynasty because it was the first one to unite all of China, or various parts of China, together. The emperor in particular, Emperor Shi Huangdi, is the one that built a significant portion of the Great Wall, and he's also the source of the terracotta soldiers that we talked about the other day. So there's a video that I want you to watch associated with the Great Wall, which I did not mention when actually I did tell you. No, did I tell you to watch the Great Wall? Anyway, there's a video. When you see the Great Wall, the slide that has the Great Wall on the map, I want you to watch the video of the Great Wall. The Great Wall video. It's only like 5 minutes long, but they talk about Emperor Shi in that, and the terracotta soldiers. And then when you get to this point in the slideshow, I want you to watch the 5 or 6 minute video on the terracotta soldiers. It kind of tells the history of how they were discovered. It's an old video, but it's still a really good video. The picture quality is not very good, but I have several pictures of the terracotta soldiers. The one of the horse, or actually the one of the people trying to dig out the soldiers, is super interesting. I think the video says there were over 7,000 unique terracotta soldiers. The slide that has the horses and the carriage and the umbrella is just unbelievable. I can't remember. I don't remember if the chains and the ropes and everything on the horses are actually terracotta or they're actually rope. They actually look like rope, but I'm not sure. But the horses themselves are terracotta. They're just crazy incredible. So watch the video on that. And then we hit a pause button on the history of China, and we jumped down to a discussion about, there's a definition in here, dynasty. What is a dynasty? Because we talk about the Chinese dynasties, but what is a dynasty? A dynasty is the definition that we use, I have the People Duck Dynasty on there, a series of rulers from the same family line. And so Duck Dynasty is called Duck Dynasty because it's a family business that is passed on from Phil to his son, Willie, and then it's a family business. A dynasty, as in Chinese dynasty, it's passed on, the rulership is passed on from family to family. It's very similar to what you see in the monarchies of Europe. It's similar to what you had in Russia with the Tsar Nicholas's family passing it on to family members. So that's what a dynasty is. And then we skipped down, I'll probably just remove a lot of these slides, but we skipped down to Kung Fu. And we talked about that Kung Fu is a traditional part of Chinese culture that dates way, 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 way back. It's a variety of martial arts, and it's generally unarmed, but not always. And if you've taken any kind of martial art classes, you know that it is primarily for defensive purposes, to be able to defend yourself and your family from attack. And so we watched the silly scene in Kung Fu Panda, which I want you to watch, where the two pandas, the red panda and the giant panda, Po and Master Shifu, Master Shifu is instructing Po in the art of Kung Fu, using food as a motivation. So Po always likes to eat, I can identify. And then we practiced some Kung Fu in class. And so you will find that there's also a video that shows 4 or 5 very basic Kung Fu moves, and I want you to practice them, and I'm going to ask you if you practice them. You'll notice that the squatting that you do is pretty painful if you actually hold it in place. You don't have to do it the full time, like they suggest that you do it for a certain period of time. All you have to do is just watch the video. It's only 5 minutes long, and do the various things that they show in the video. Okay, so I'm going to ask you. And so we ended it there. That's the end of this week for you guys, and then we have this week off, coming week off with Thanksgiving, and hopefully we will all be reunited together on the Monday after Thanksgiving. I'm praying that that will be the case. When we get back from vacation, Thanksgiving break, we're going to do a show and tell, made in China show and tell. So be looking around your house for the most unusual and interesting thing that you have that has a made in China label on it. The person who comes up with the funnest, craziest, weirdest made in China show and tell will receive a prize. So be on the lookout for that. So have a great vacation, and just when you're finished with this lesson, submit your daily assignment log, and I will get it noted or logged into RunWeb. Okay, see ya.